There was a time when almost every British street looked the same. Walk outside your front door and you'd probably see the same handful of cars parked along the curb. They weren't expensive sports cars or luxury saloons. They were honest, dependable British cars that ordinary families, neighbors and workmates all seemed to own. Some became part of everyday life for decades. Others quietly disappeared without most people even noticing. How many of these do you remember seeing on your street? Let us know in the comments. Now, here are 10 British cars every neighbor seemed to own, but are almost gone today. Number 10. The Hillman Avenger. If you lived in Britain during the 1970s, chances are someone on your street owned a Hillman Avenger. It wasn't the sort of car people dreamed about as children. Nobody pinned posters of it to their bedroom wall. But thousands of families trusted it every single day. Built to compete with cars like the Ford Escort and Morris Marina, the Avenger quickly earned a reputation for being practical, affordable, and surprisingly dependable. Working families appreciated its sensible running costs, while parents liked having 4 proper doors and enough room for shopping, luggage, and the children. One reason the Avenger became so common was its simplicity. Local garages knew exactly how to repair them, spare parts were easy to find, and servicing rarely emptied your wallet. That mattered during the difficult economic years of the 1970s, when every pound counted. It also became popular with company drivers, sales representatives, and young couples buying their first proper family car. Unlike some rivals, the Avenger didn't try to be flashy. It simply got on with the job. Many owners later admitted that they only intended to keep one for a few years. Instead, they often kept them for well over a decade because the car refused to let them down. Of course, not everyone loved the Avenger. Some drivers criticized its basic interior, while others felt it lacked excitement compared with Ford's sportier models. But if your priority was affordable, reliable transport, it was difficult to complain. Today, spotting an Avenger on British roads feels incredibly rare. Most quietly disappeared through rust, age, and scrapyards. Yet for many older Britons, seeing one today instantly brings back memories of neighbors washing theirs on Sunday mornings or loading it up before heading off on a family holiday. Did someone on your street own an Avenger, or was there another forgotten family car you remember seeing everywhere? While the Avenger quietly earned respect through practicality, the next car became famous because it seemed to appear outside almost every British semi-detached house. Number 9. Austin Maxi. The Austin Maxi has never enjoyed the glamorous reputation of the Mini or the Jaguar XJ. But ask people who actually owned one, and many will tell you a very different story. When British Leyland introduced the Maxi in 1969, it offered something many growing families desperately needed. Plenty of it. 5 doors were still unusual at the time, giving families easy access to the rear seats while making shopping trips and holidays much easier. Inside, the Maxi felt surprisingly roomy. Parents could comfortably fit children in the back, while the huge luggage area swallowed everything from suitcases to garden supplies. Some owners even folded the rear seats flat and slept inside during camping holidays. That flexibility helped make it incredibly popular with practical-minded buyers. Mechanically, opinions were divided. Some people praised its comfortable ride and excellent fuel economy. Others complained about early gearboxes and inconsistent build quality. Like many British Leyland products, the Maxi wasn't perfect. Yet despite its faults, it sold in huge numbers because it offered genuine value for money. It became one of those cars that quietly blended into everyday British life. You'd see one parked outside schools, another outside supermarkets, and another sitting proudly on a neighbor's driveway every evening after work. Perhaps that's why people rarely noticed just how common they had become. They simply became part of the scenery. Ironically, because many Maxis were used hard as family workhorses, relatively few survived. Most eventually wore out after years of loyal service. Today, finding a clean Austin Maxi is surprisingly difficult, making them far rarer than many people realize. Be honest, did you ever travel in one? Or do you remember a neighbor who seemed to keep theirs forever? But if the Maxi blended quietly into British suburbia, the next car became one of the most recognizable sights on almost every street in the country. Number 8. Ford Cortina Mk3. Few cars define everyday Britain quite like the Ford Cortina. By the early 1970s, it seemed impossible to walk through a neighborhood without spotting one. In fact, many streets had several. The Mk3 introduced bold American-inspired styling that looked modern without becoming expensive. It appealed to almost everyone. Young families bought them. Builders drove them. Teachers drove them. Company executives chose better-equipped versions, while ordinary workers happily bought the more affordable models. That flexibility helped explain its enormous success. Ford also understood something many manufacturers sometimes forgot. People wanted choices. Buyers could select different engines, trim levels, and equipment depending on their budget. Whether you wanted basic transport or something a little smarter, there was usually a Cortina waiting at the dealership. Owners appreciated another major advantage: reliability. Combined with Ford's huge dealer network, maintaining a Cortina remained straightforward almost anywhere in Britain. Need a repair? Parts were usually available quickly and at sensible prices. Not everyone thought the Cortina was exciting. Some critics argued it played things a little too safe. Others believed competitors offered more character. Yet millions of British drivers clearly disagreed. Sales figures spoke for themselves. The Cortina became Britain's best-selling car for several years and earned a place in everyday British culture. Television programs, films, and family photo albums all seem to feature one somewhere in the background. Today, however, the Mk3 has become increasingly rare. Rust claimed countless examples, while many simply disappeared after decades of faithful service. Seeing one now feels like stepping back into the Britain of the 1970s. And amazingly, the next car became almost as common despite costing significantly less to buy. Number 7. Morris Marina. Love it or hate it, there was a time when the Morris Marina seemed to be parked outside every other house in Britain. Introduced in 1971, British Leland desperately needed a dependable family car that ordinary people could actually afford. The Marina became their answer. And for a while it worked. It wasn't bought because people thought it looked beautiful. It wasn't bought because it was fast. People bought it because it fitted the family budget. Young couples moving into their first home often found the Marina sitting on the driveway. Parents used it for the school run, while thousands of workers depended on one for the daily commute. One of its biggest strengths was familiarity. Every local mechanic knew how to repair one. Parts were inexpensive, servicing was straightforward, and insurance remained reasonable compared with many rivals. That made ownership much less stressful. Of course, the Marina also received plenty of criticism. Journalists often compared it unfavorably with more modern European competitors, claiming it felt old-fashioned almost from the day it launched. Yet ordinary buyers cared far more about affordability than magazine reviews. Many owners kept theirs for years because replacing it simply wasn't worth the expense. Like so many British family cars, the Marina became part of everyday life. Children learned to drive in them. Families packed them for summer holidays. Neighbors borrowed them to move furniture. It quietly earned its place on Britain's roads. Today, however, the Marina has almost disappeared completely. Rust claimed countless examples, while many simply wore out after decades of faithful service. Spotting one now feels genuinely unusual. Here's a question: were you one of the people who actually liked the Marina, or did your family avoid buying one altogether? While the Marina became famous through sheer numbers, the next car won hearts because it offered something slightly different: comfort. Number 6. Vauxhall Viva. The Vauxhall Viva became one of Britain's greatest everyday success stories. It never tried to compete with expensive executive cars. Instead, it focused on ordinary families. That simple approach worked brilliantly. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, the Viva became a familiar sight almost everywhere. Drive through any housing estate, factory car park, or supermarket, and you'd almost certainly spot at least one. Families loved its sensible size. Large enough for everyday life. Small enough to keep running costs low. For first-time buyers especially, the Viva represented an achievable dream. Owning a brand new car suddenly felt possible. Fuel economy remained impressive for the period, while routine servicing rarely caused financial headaches. Many owners later admitted they expected to upgrade after only a few years. Instead, they kept their Viva much longer because it simply continued doing everything they asked of it. The car also appealed to driving instructors. Its light controls and predictable handling made it ideal for teaching new drivers. That meant thousands of learners completed their first driving lessons behind the wheel of a Viva. It wasn't exciting. It wasn't glamorous. But that's exactly why so many people trusted it. It concentrated on doing ordinary jobs extremely well. As newer front-wheel drive hatchbacks arrived during the late 1970s, the Viva slowly faded away. One by one, they disappeared from Britain's roads. Today they're surprisingly difficult to find, despite once being absolutely everywhere. For many older motorists, however, just hearing the name Viva immediately brings back memories of family outings, shopping trips, and weekends away. Quick question: if someone offered you a perfectly restored Viva today, would you actually drive it every day? If you thought the Viva appeared on every street, wait until you see the next car. It became so common that many people stopped noticing it altogether. Number 5. Austin Allegro. Mention the Austin Allegro today and you'll probably hear a joke before you hear a compliment. But back in the 1970s, things looked very different. For thousands of British families, the Allegro wasn't a punchline. It was simply the family car sitting outside the house. British Leyland launched it in 1973 with huge expectations. The company hoped it would become the next everyday British favorite, replacing older models that were beginning to look outdated. At first, buyers responded well. Their Allegro offered comfortable seats, front-wheel drive, good fuel economy, and a surprisingly smooth ride. For parents trying to balance rising household bills, those qualities mattered far more than sharp styling. It quickly became a common sight outside council houses, suburban homes, and factory gates. Many people bought one because they already trusted Austin. Others simply found it affordable compared with imported rivals. Their Allegro wasn't perfect. Quality problems damaged its reputation, and its unusual styling divided opinion almost from the beginning. Yet many owners defended it. They'll tell you theirs started every morning, carried the children to school, survived family holidays, and faithfully served for years. Like so many everyday British cars, the Allegro's greatest achievement wasn't excitement. It was reliability for ordinary families who simply needed transport. Sadly, once newer hatchbacks arrived during the 1980s, many Allegros were traded in, scrapped, or forgotten. Today, seeing one on British roads feels genuinely unusual. Be honest, do you think the Allegro deserved all the criticism it received, or has history judged it a little too harshly? If the Allegro divided opinion, the next car united almost everyone, because nearly every family seemed to know someone who owned one. Number 4. Ford Escort Mk2. There are famous British cars. Then there's the Ford Escort Mk2. By the late 1970s, it had become almost impossible to avoid. Every neighborhood had one. Sometimes every street had several. The Escort appealed to nearly everyone because it could be almost anything. Families chose practical four-door versions. Young drivers preferred sportier models. Small business owners appreciated its dependability. Even police forces used them. That versatility helped make the Escort one of Britain's biggest automotive success stories. Running costs remained sensible. Mechanics understood them perfectly. Replacement parts could be found almost anywhere. And because Ford dealerships covered the entire country, servicing rarely became a problem. Parents trusted them for everyday family life. Children remember sitting in the back on long summer journeys to the seaside. Shopping fitted easily into the boot. Weekend DIY projects became much easier thanks to its practicality. The Escort also earned an excellent reputation for durability. Many examples stayed with the same family for years before eventually being passed down to younger drivers. Some even survived into the 1990s despite decades of daily use. Today, however, finding a clean Mk2 Escort has become incredibly difficult. Values have risen dramatically as enthusiasts compete for the few remaining examples. Ironically, a car once considered completely ordinary has become highly desirable. That's the power of nostalgia. People rarely realize how special something was until it disappears. Here's something we'd love to know. What color Escort do you remember seeing most often on your street? White, blue, red, or maybe beige? The next car may not have become quite as valuable, but during its heyday it seemed to appear outside almost every semi-detached house in Britain. Number 3. Austin Maestro. By the early 1980s, Britain was changing fast. Families wanted something more modern, more efficient, and more practical than many of the cars they'd been driving for years. That's exactly where the Austin Maestro arrived. When it was launched in 1983, British Leyland hoped it would become the next great British family hatchback. And for a while, it looked as though they might be right. The Maestro offered generous interior space, excellent visibility, and impressive fuel economy. It felt modern compared with many of its aging rivals, making it an attractive choice for young families looking to upgrade. You'd regularly see one outside supermarkets, schools, and office car parks. Company fleets also bought thousands of them, meaning they quickly became a familiar sight across Britain. Owners appreciated how comfortable they were on longer journeys, while the large hatchback boot made everyday life much easier. Whether it was luggage, shopping, or the family dog, the Maestro swallowed it all with ease. Like many British cars of the period, quality wasn't always perfect. But many owners will tell you their Maestros served them faithfully for years. Today, however, they're almost impossible to find on British roads. Most quietly disappeared as newer hatchbacks took over. Here's a question. Do you think the Maestro deserved more success than it actually received? If the Maestro represented Britain's attempt at a modern family hatchback, the next car helped rebuild confidence in an entire British brand. Number 2. Rover 200. The Rover 200 arrived at exactly the right moment. By the late 1980s, Rover desperately needed a fresh start. After years of criticism about reliability and quality, the company needed a car that could win buyers back. Fortunately, the Rover 200 delivered. Developed with help from Honda, it combined British styling with dependable engineering, giving buyers confidence they hadn't felt in years. Families appreciated its comfortable ride, solid build quality, and economical engines. It quickly became a popular choice for commuters, company drivers, and small families wanting something that felt slightly more premium without costing a fortune. Unlike many forgotten family cars, the Rover 200 also looked smart. It had clean styling that aged remarkably well, helping it remain competitive throughout the 1990s. For a while, it genuinely appeared that Rover had found its way back. Although later financial problems eventually caught up with the company, the Rover 200 remains one of its greatest modern success stories. Today, seeing one on British roads is becoming increasingly rare, making every surviving example a reminder of Rover's final successful years. Did someone in your family own a Rover 200, or did you always prefer one of its rivals? That leaves just one car. A car that truly became part of everyday Britain. Number 1. Austin Metro. If one car deserves the title of Britain's neighborhood car during the 1980s, it's the Austin Metro. When British Leyland launched it in 1980, the company desperately needed a winner. Thankfully, the public responded immediately. The Metro was affordable, economical, and easy to drive. It appealed to first-time buyers, growing families, pensioners, and company drivers alike. Within just a few years, it seemed impossible to walk through a British housing estate without spotting at least one. Sometimes there were several parked on the same street. Parents used them for the school run. Young drivers learned to drive in them. Families packed them full for seaside holidays. They simply became part of everyday British life. Running costs stayed low, fuel economy impressed owners, and the compact size made parking effortless in crowded towns and cities. It wasn't the fastest car. It wasn't the most luxurious. But it was exactly what millions of ordinary Britons needed. That's why so many people remember it so fondly today. Sadly, like many everyday family cars, most Metros eventually disappeared through age, rust, and constant use. Today, finding a clean, original Austin Metro is surprisingly difficult. Yet for millions of people, it remains one of the most nostalgic British cars ever built. Perhaps that's because it wasn't just a car. It was part of family life. School mornings, shopping trips, summer holidays, and memories that still make people smile decades later. One final question. Which of these cars do you remember seeing most often on your street, and which one brings back the strongest memories?